everyone, I'm Beth from the West Allis Public Library, and welcome back for another episode of our Who HQ Summer Book Club. This is episode 3 in Who Was Amelia Earhart. Quick reminder, we do have all of our past books on our YouTube page, so feel free to go back and watch any that you might have missed or just sound interesting. And sign up for summer reading. It's a big one. You get a free book just for signing up, so pretty good deal. All right, so we're on chapter 4, Amelia Takes Off. With her pilot's license in hand, Amelia flew in some air shows. Most pilots were men, so a young woman attracted a lot of attention. Amelia didn't like to be on display, but she worked in the shows to earn money. She had to keep flying. Then, Amelia's friend and teacher, Netta Snook, got married. Just as Amelia feared, her friend's flying days were over. Netta would now be a wife and mother, so Amelia needed another instructor. She teamed up with an expert named Monty Tijo. Monty had flown in the Army. He also did stunt work flying in the movies. Monty taught Amelia a lot. She even learned to do tricks in the air like huge upside down loops. Okay. Now she felt like trying for a flying record. Amelia wanted to see how high she could go. Amelia didn't tell anyone her plans. She had an instrument put in her plane. It measured how high above the ground the plane was. In the early 1920s, planes didn't fly as high as they do today. One reason was because the cockpits were open. At higher altitudes, there's not much oxygen to breathe. Amelia knew she could pass out if she went too high, but she was willing to risk it. So now when you're in an airplane, you're enclosed and there's machines on the plane that kind of regulate the air pressure so you won't pass out. Keeps you safe. But with an open airplane, there's nothing to do that. You're just out with the wind flapping in your face. So if you get too high and the air gets thin, you don't have enough oxygen, hence possibly passing out. So that was dangerous. Okay, it took 2 attempts. Amelia flew through the fog and sleet. She finally made it to 14,000 feet, more than 2.5 miles high. Then her plane's engine began to fail. Amelia brought her plane down fast. She was just barely able to make a safe landing, but she had her record. Although Amelia loved to fly, she soon found out that she couldn't support herself just by flying. There were no big airlines or airplanes yet. People did not travel by plane. In fact, most people never expected to take a ride in a plane. In 1924, Amelia temporarily gave up on her dream. She sold the Canary and used the money to buy a car. You might guess that Amelia would pick a practical automobile like the Ford Model T. She didn't. She bought a fancy yellow convertible. Good for her. If she couldn't fly in the air, she would at least have the feeling of flying across the ground. Amelia named her car the Yellow Peril. She and her mother drove across country and headed for the East Coast. Amelia went back to Columbia University, but again, it wasn't for long. She had to drop out again, as usual. The problem was money. Sam Chapman followed Amelia out east. He proposed marriage again. It was tempting. Amelia was now 28 years old. Most people thought women of this age were already old maids. If Amelia married Sam, she wouldn't have to worry so much about money. However, Sam would want her to stay home and have children. Amelia had to decide. To her, the choice was very clear. Amelia told her sister Muriel of her decision. I don't want to marry him, Amelia said. I don't want to marry anyone. Amelia couldn't stand the thought of giving up her freedom. The next job Amelia found was in Boston. She worked at Dennison House, where she took care of poor children. Amelia really liked the job. She knew she was doing something worthwhile. Flying was now limited to weekends, but she watched other pilots with interest. In 1927, a man named Charles Lindbergh made news all over the world. He was the first pilot to fly alone across the Atlantic Ocean. It took him more than 33 hours to fly from Long Island, New York, to Paris. A woman from London named Amy Guest wanted to be the first woman to fly across the Atlantic. Guest was not a pilot, so she would set the record just by being a passenger in the plane. George Putnam, a book publisher in New York, was going to oversee her attempt. However, Amy's family wouldn't let her go. So George Putnam had to find another woman, and this time, he wanted a pilot. I'm going to do a quick blurb here about Charles Lindbergh. Charles Lindbergh started out as a barnstormer. That's what pilots who did daring tricks at early air shows in the 1920s were called. But on May 21st, 1927, Charles left his tricks behind and entered the record books. No one had ever made a solo trip across the Atlantic Ocean before. It was very dangerous. His plane, called the Spirit of St. Louis, was only 28 feet long. Lindbergh's biggest problem was staying awake. Remember, that was 33 hours. So he'd stick his head out the plane's window for blasts of cold air. He also kept reminding himself that if he slept, he would die. True. Okay. So Putnam's looking for a pilot. Putnam ran a big publishing company, so he knew a lot of people. He was good at making deals. Putnam asked a friend to find the right woman for the trip. The friend found Amelia Earhart. Chapter 5. Amelia becomes a hero. Amelia met with both George Putnam and Amy Guest in New York. They both thought she was perfect. Attractive, polite, well-educated, she got the job. The job was actually not nearly as good as it sounded. Amelia wouldn't get paid. A man named Wilmer Stoltz would fly the plane. He'd get $20,000. And although Amelia was called the captain, she was really just a passenger. Why did Amelia agree? First, no woman had ever crossed the Atlantic by plane. The experience alone was enough to make Amelia go. Amelia summed up her feelings in a letter to a friend. When a great adventure is offered to you, you don't refuse it. That's all. Amelia also hoped that if the trip were successful, all the attention could bring her other flying jobs. The flight was very dangerous. Charles Lindbergh had made the trip safely, but 14 other people had died trying to cross the ocean. 3 had been women. Still, 2 other women pilots were already planning to try it. Amelia had to move quickly if she wanted to be the first. The plane, called the Friendship, took off from Boston on June 3, 1928. However, the crew had to land in Canada because of bad weather. Many days went by. The Friendship was still not able to take off. Amelia discovered another problem. Her pilot, Wilmer Stoltz, drank too much. If Wilmer got drunk, she knew he couldn't fly the plane. But if they did not take off soon, Amelia would lose the record. It was now or never. On June 16th, Amelia made a decision. She told Wilmer to get ready to fly. They were leaving the next day, no matter what. On the morning of June 17th, Amelia sent a cable to George Putnam, back in Boston. The cable read, "Violet, cheerio, A.E." Violet was a code word. It meant that the friendship was taking off. Through the long flight, Wilmer Stultz and his co-pilot, Slim Gordon, took turns flying the plane. Amelia wrote notes in her journal. After 20 hours of flying, they were low on fuel. Could they find land in time? The answer was yes. The friendship touched down in Bury Port, South Wales, 20 hours and 40 minutes after taking off from the Canadian coast. They had done it. On June 18th, 1928, Amelia Earhart became the first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. What came next was a surprise for Amelia. The trip made her an instant hero. Amelia hadn't flown the plane, but people still thought she was very brave. In London, Amelia was entertained by the rich and famous. She had tea with royalty. On her return to America, Amelia was met with even greater excitement. There were parades and speeches. Crowds of people wanted to see and hear the brave female. Many people compared Amelia Earhart to the famous pilot Charles Lindbergh. They thought that Amelia, who was tall and slim, even looked like Lindbergh. Amelia's nickname became Lady Lindy. George Putnam liked this a lot. He knew he could make Amelia even more famous. All the attention was hard on Amelia. Sometimes she was frightened by the push of people trying to get near her. However, Amelia was a smart woman. She knew she would have to be in the spotlight if she wanted to fly planes and break records. Amelia also knew that if people got excited about flying, then the tiny airline business would grow. Amelia hoped to be part of that business. If Amelia made speeches, she would also be paid. That meant that she could buy another airplane. With her own plane, she could set more records. That would lead to more speeches and more money. For the first time in her life, Amelia started to believe that she could actually make a living by flying. George Putnam became Amelia's manager. He set up lots of appearances for her. In 6 months, Amelia made over 100 speeches and gave more than 200 interviews. Amelia did not complain about her busy schedule. She was given a new car for an appearance at an auto show. She also made money by letting companies use her name to advertise their products. The fur-lined leather Amelia Earhart flying suit became very popular in a New York department store. Amelia also became an editor for Cosmopolitan magazine and wrote a column about aviation. Amelia didn't really like to write, but the articles brought more publicity. Many of the magazine's readers thought that Amelia was a good role model for young girls. Okay, we're going to stop there for today, and we'll pick up tomorrow with episode 4. So this has been episode 3 of Who Was Amelia Earhart? I'm Beth from the West Dallas Public Library, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.